A cabinet secretary signed away 100 million barrels of oil in secret. Nobody knew until the congressional investigators showed up. October 1924. A Senate hearing room in Washington, D.C. Albert Fall sat in the witness chair, sweating through his suit. The committee had been circling him for months. They had documents, they had testimony, they had enough. Within weeks, Fall would become the first U.S. cabinet secretary ever imprisoned for crimes committed in office. But we need to rewind. The story begins 4 years earlier, in 1920, when Warren Harding won the presidency. Harding was affable, good-looking, and fundamentally incurious about details. He promised a return to normalcy after the chaos of World War I. America wanted to believe him. They elected him by a landslide. Harding's cabinet included a man named Albert Fall. Fall was a New Mexico politician with a sprawling ranch and a taste for expensive things. He'd served in the Senate. He seemed respectable. Harding named him Secretary of the Interior. Fall now controlled the nation's oil reserves. Those reserves mattered. The U.S. Navy had recently converted its fleet from coal to oil. The government had set aside 3 naval petroleum reserves, 1 in California, 1 in Wyoming, 1 in North Dakota. They were insurance. They were strategic. They were not Fall's to sell. But Fall had a plan. In 1921, he convinced Harding to transfer control of those reserves from the Navy to the Interior Department. Harding signed the order without reading it carefully. This was characteristic of Harding. He trusted his people. He was wrong too. Once Fall controlled the reserves, he moved quickly. He reached out to 2 oilmen, Harry Sinclair of Mammoth Oil and Edward Doheny of American Petroleum. Both men wanted access to the reserves. Both men were willing to pay. Fall arranged secret meetings. The deal was structured as a lease. Fall would let Sinclair and Doheny drill the reserves. They would pay the government a percentage of what they extracted. On paper, it looked legitimate. In practice, it was theft. The oil belonged to the American people. Fall was giving it away to friends. But Fall needed something in return. He couldn't just hand over 100 million barrels for nothing. So Sinclair and Doheny started paying him directly, not in checks, in gifts, in cash, in loans that were never repaid. Fall's ranch suddenly had new buildings, new livestock, new equipment. Doheny gave Fall over $400,000 in bribes. Sinclair gave more. Fall's lifestyle transformed. He went from a moderately wealthy politician to a man living like an oil baron. In 1923, Harding died in office. Vice President Calvin Coolidge became president. Coolidge was different from Harding. Coolidge paid attention. Fall tried to retire quietly in early 1923. He claimed he needed to tend to his ranch. Nobody suspected anything yet, but rumors were spreading in Washington. Journalists had started asking questions. Senator Thomas Walsh of Montana decided to investigate. Walsh was relentless. He subpoenaed documents. He interviewed witnesses. He traced the money. By late 1923, he had enough evidence to demand a full Senate investigation. The leases with Sinclair and Doheny were exposed. The bribes were exposed. Fall's ranch improvements were traced back to oilmen's checks. Fall initially denied everything. He claimed the gifts were personal loans from Doheny, unrelated to the oil leases. He said his ranch improvements came from his own resources. The evidence contradicted him. The timeline contradicted him. The paper trail contradicted him. The scandal consumed Washington. Harding's legacy was destroyed. The public felt betrayed. Here was their president's trusted cabinet, revealed as corrupt. Here was the Interior Department, revealed as a vehicle for theft. The scandal became shorthand for everything wrong with government. In 1927, the Supreme Court invalidated the leases. The oil reserves were returned to the government, but the damage was done. Sinclair went to prison for bribery and contempt of court. Doheny was acquitted, though his reputation was ruined. Fall faced trial. On March 29, 1929, Albert Fall was convicted of bribery. He was sentenced to 9 months in prison. He was the first cabinet secretary in American history to serve time for crimes committed in office. He was also bankrupt. The ranch was gone. The money was gone. His career was erased. The Teapot Dome Scandal, named after the Wyoming Reserve, became a watershed moment. It exposed how easily power could be abused, how easily public resources could be stolen, how easily government officials could prioritize personal gain over national interest. It was a warning that went largely unheeded. What made Teapot Dome different from other scandals was its clarity. There was no ambiguity. A government official had taken bribes to give away public resources to private companies. The public could see it. The courts could prove it. The consequences were real. For Fall, they were devastating. Fall died in 1944, broken and forgotten. His name survives only as a cautionary tale. But the mechanisms of corruption he revealed, the secret meetings, the delayed payments, the layered transactions, these remain relevant. They remain teachable. They remain, unfortunately, timeless. Subscribe for more cases where the machinery of power breaks down under the weight of greed.